Jesus really means to me. For he's more wonderful than my mind can conceive. He's more wonderful than my heart can believe. He goes beyond my highest hopes and fondest dreams. He's everything that my soul ever longed for, everything he's promised, and so much more than amazing, more than marvelous, more than miraculous could ever be. He's more than wonderful. That's what Jesus is to me. I stand amazed to think the King of Glory will come to live within the heart of man. I marvel just to know he really loves me. When I think of who he is and who I am. For he's more wonderful than my mind can conceive. He's more wonderful than my heart can believe. He goes beyond my highest hopes and fondest dreams. He's everything that my soul ever longed for, everything he's promised, and so much more than amazing, more than marvelous, more than miraculous could ever be. He's more than wonderful. That's what Jesus is to me. He's everything that my soul ever longed for, everything he's promised, and so much more than amazing, more than marvelous, more than miraculous could ever be. He's more than wonderful, more than wonderful. That's what Jesus is to me.
Beautiful song, sang by a beautiful voice. We're fortunate here at Kellytown to have the singers that we do have. I'm going to talk a little bit tonight. I'm going to, let's say, teach from the book of Jude. The book of Jude is a very short book. It is almost what you'd call a negative book in that there's so much negativity in it. But anyway, he says in the first couple of verses there, Jude does, that he identifies himself as James's brother. Now, that's not telling us much. There are 4 Jameses in the New Testament, so we're probably going to assume that he is speaking of the half-brother of Jesus, that James. And that then would put Jude, a half-brother, to Jesus. You got to remember that Jesus' family did not support him during his earthly ministry here. After his death and ascension, then James got involved and, as a matter of fact, became a powerful leader of the church in Jerusalem. And then Jude wrote this particular book here. We don't know exactly when the book of Jude was written. It could be maybe Scofield says it was written in the year of 66, and the King James Version thinks it was written in 65. Other scholars have it up as far as year 140, which is not very practical if this man was indeed the half-brother of Jesus. What Jude is facing is a church that he loves and a church that he knows the people who go there. And he has been informed and he knows firsthand that there's something going on in the church that should not be. Originally, Jude meant to write just a nice little sweet letter to the church. But after he found out some of the many things that was going on, then he had to write a more stern, a harder letter. Now, let's think just for a minute before we get into the scriptures. What are the contributions of Jude? As I said, Jude was a negative writer. He was negative in that the things that were going on in his church, in a church that he was familiar with, were negative things. And you've got to remember that we need to know about negative things. We need to understand that false teachers exist. And we need to understand that false teaching can be attractive and pull people away from the fundamental gospel that Jesus taught. So that's what apparently was happening in the church in which Jude was writing to. Now, Jude had a strategy. He knew that the false prophets that had entered, let's say, had slipped into the church, unaware maybe of the true Christians. And he felt that as a result, the church needed to be reminded that they may be in our church, but they will be punished for what they are doing. And so Jude says, here's what I'm going to do, church. Listen to me. I am going to look in the Old Testament. I'm going to find 2 or 3 characters who did wrong. And 2 or 3 characters that were rebels or heretics or just plain old sinners. And after I tell you about them, this is Jude speaking, then I'm going to show you how these false prophets fit in with them. And the first one, he gets started out saying that, beloved, we're in verse 3, indicates here that he had a close relationship to this church and to the people in it. And as I said, he was going to write a good letter, but he ended up writing a pretty harsh letter. Now, Jesus came along and said that it is through grace, the unmerited favor of God, that man has access to Christ. These false prophets were saying, okay, look at this. If Jesus is saying we've got grace, that's what's going to get you to heaven, then we can do anything else. We can be as immoral as we want to. They were saying that grace was not important. They were saying that the lordship of God and Jesus were not important. They were saying that the gospel, as Jesus left it here, was not important. And they were saying that they could scoff at the actual apostles because they were not important. And Jude is saying, all right, you guys are going to be punished for this. And this is what's going to happen. You recall that going back to Exodus and to the trip through the wilderness, and after they had wandered around for maybe 40 plus days, they got to the end of their journey, and Moses and God were telling the people it was time for us to go and take the promised land. But the elders said, oh, wait a minute. We don't know what's over there. We've been walking around, stumbling around here for 40 days. There could be anything. Why don't we send a group of men out and let them look the area over and see? Well, of course, Moses did not want to do that, but he did in the end. So he picked 12 men and he sent them on a mission. And that mission was to check out the promised land. And as they went, they saw many, many things that maybe was of interest or things that actually feared them. And they saw beautiful land, and they saw rivers and creeks, and it was a promised land. It was a beautiful place. But when they came back, Moses said, how'd it go, guys? What do you think? Can we go and settle? 10 of the 12 said, oh, Lord, no. They have giants over there. There was a group of people who were 8, 9 feet tall that lived over there. They have cities that have big walls around them. No, they had no way we can conquer those people. Caleb and Joshua, who were the other two, who said, wait, the Lord is with us. We can conquer. We can go into the promised land. But the other 10 held strong. As a result, God became angry with them. He said, I'm going to punish you. He said, you don't want to go when I ask you to go, you will never go. He said, anybody that's the age of 20 up, will never see the promised land. Your children will, but you won't. And then as a result, they wandered around for 40 years. But here was a group who took it upon themselves to have a dispute, I guess you would say, with the leader. And as a result, they were punished by not getting to go into the promised land. Another particular type thing that Jude was wanting them to see, there is some information in the Bible about the angels who rebelled. They were not happy with their domicile wherever they were. And as a result, not a scripture book of Enoch, but in a book binding, it is written that they were chained and being held until the judgment day, that they may be cast into the lake of fire. And that's very well going to happen. The other point that Jude is trying to make is, you remember Sodom and Gomorrah, he says? You remember those people? You remember Lot going over there and living with them? You remember Lot's family was in a house when two angels came? Those angels came into Lot's house. Now, the people pressed around. The people living in that town were sexual, whatever word you want to use, perverts. They were trying to get in the house to get to these two men, that they might have relations with them. That they didn't, I don't know whether they were interested in his daughters or not, but they were interested in these men. And if you recall, the angel said, God is going to destroy this place. Get your family and get out of here. And they momentarily blinded all the people, and they couldn't see the door to get in. And the angels and Lot left, got away, went elsewhere. And when they looked back later, God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah with fire and brimstone. They also rebelled against God. They tried to take it upon themselves to live by their own vision, to live by their own desire, and put God on the outside. God created this universe, and we cannot push him aside. And Jude was trying to get his people to understand that these three groups of people are found in your Old Testament, and we see that God punished them. And just as sure as God punished those people, he's going to punish these false prophets that's living with you now in your church. Now, the story goes on, and it says Jude says, "Woe." And when we say woe, we mean to stop. Something big is going to happen. And he says, woe to the false prophets. He says, I'm going to show you 3 examples of people who turned their back upon the Lord, people who tried to change God's standards, and see the punishment that they received. And very quickly, I'll run through this. The first one was Cain. You know, Cain slew Abel. Cain and Abel were 2 young men that grew up. And after a period of time, I guess, somehow, I don't know, they felt that maybe their life was sinful and they needed to make a sacrifice. And Abel made a sacrifice of animal blood because he was a shepherd. Cain made a sacrifice of fruits, etc. But one of the problems with Cain's sacrifice was that his attitude was wrong. God took him aside and he talked to him. He didn't accuse him of anything. He said, come on, I'll give you another chance. You need to make an offering that's worthy of me. And not only that, you need to change your attitude about this stuff. And consequently, in just a few days, Cain killed Abel. He changed his attitude, all right. He went from bad to worse. And with that death, it began a long history of human violence. We see man's inhumanity to man. We watch TV and we see film of people shooting up everybody. I mean, that's a movie, but it's also a reality. Look in our own Knoxville neighborhood. little kids that can't get out on the street because of man's inhumanity to his fellow man. And of course, this was a reminder to Adam and Eve that the consequences of sin is death. And though Eve is the one who really got it going, it was a reminder to her by one of her sons. Now, another group of people is actually one person that Jude talks about, and that's a priest by the name of Balaam. Balaam was what you would call a soothsayer, a false prophet. He was hired by the king of Moab to put a curse on the Israelites as they were walking around on that 40-year journey. And he tried to curse them, but he was unsuccessful. His intention was to get the Israelis, the Jewish people, to serve the local deity who was Baal, B-A-A-L. He was the chief priest or God in that area. But, fortunately, the Jews did not. The Baal group had prostitutes that was in their temple. And he sent these prostitutes out to find these poor old Jewish men to try to entice them to come and join in their orgies. I'm sure some did, but most of them did not. And he tried to get these women, to get these men to eat food that had been offered to the gods. And you know that's a no-no in Israeli history. You don't eat any food that's been presented before God. And then the last one is this. And this is found in the book of Numbers. Korah, K-O-R-A-H, was a young man who was of the tribe of Levi, and he was kind of full of himself. And he had a couple of friends who were not Levites, who were not priests, but they were political people. So Korah and his two friends and 250 young men representing the communities came to Moses and came to Aaron and said, look, guys, you see all these 250 people and these people? We're all holy. We're priests. Why is it that you, Aaron, you, Moses, are our boss? Why can't we have the same jobs that you have? Well, poor old Moses, of course, he fell on the ground and cried and called out to God. He knew that God had appointed him from the days in Egypt to lead the people to the promised land. And he said this, I tell you what, Korah, tomorrow morning, I want you to come here before the tent and bring your friends and your family, and we'll see if you get the job of high priest. So, without doubt, next morning, not only those people came, the 250 and the other three, but a lot of the citizens came. And they're standing there near a tent. And Moses tells them very calmly, you better move away from that tent. And they did. Now, Moses had promised that in the morning, which is now morning, we'll find out if I'm supposed to be the leader. If these men, he said, right here, if Korah and his friends die a normal death, then you will know that I was not supposed to be the leader. But should the earth open up and swallow them, then you'll know that God appointed me. And instantly the earth opened up and swallowed those people. And instantly the 250 over here was consumed by fire. Again, people trying to butt into God's business. And that's what the false prophets are doing in Jude's town. They are trying to get involved. Now, Jude gave those examples to let the people know for a certainty that they would be punished. There is going to be a punishment for them. You know, well, okay. Then we move along a little. The citizens of this little town where the church was, they had allowed false prophets to enter their community and enter their church, maybe without even knowing it. But they did allow it to happen. Now, Jude told them that if you read the scriptures, you will find out that in the latter days, false prophets will come. And false prophets will enter your church. False prophets doesn't have to be a teacher or a preacher or somebody big. A false prophet could be sitting on the back row back here just complaining every Sunday about something, or murmuring about something, causing static, causing some trouble. This is what the false prophets wanted. They did. They wanted to disrupt the Christian program that Christ had died for. Now, and to almost conclude here, Jude said this: if you make an error, if you mess up somehow, well, there's an antidote for that. And the antidote is to back up and get away from whatever you erred on, whatever you did wrong. Move away from it. But at the same time, reach forward to God, praying to God that He will give you the strength, and you will get away from the error you made. The error will not stay with you always. If you ask God to remove it, He will. It'll be gone. And the last thing that Jude was trying to tell these people is, look, if you want to keep your faith active. Now, if we go over to the gym here and we do all these exercises, we keep our body active. If you want to keep your faith active, your faith, then you need to do a couple of things. You need to help the poor, and you need to promote the gospel of Jesus. If, as church members, we do that, then we will be exercising our faith, and we'll grow as God would want us to grow. And then in the last part here is the last verses of Jude. And I'd like to use that as my closing prayer. And I'll try to read this. Now, unto Him that is able to keep you from falling and to present you faultless before the presence of His glory with exceeding joy, to the only wise God, our Savior, this being Jesus Christ, be glory and majestic dominion, and have power both now and forever. Amen.